once again to the Iron City Roundhouse Report, the podcast where the love for the high iron meets the precision of the scale model. Whether you're tracking the latest Class 1 freight movements or perfecting the scenery on your home layout, we're here to celebrate the history and hobby of railroading. Climb aboard and settle in as we clear the signals for another journey through the world of trains.
Hello, once again, and welcome to another episode of the Iron City Roundhouse Report. This is kind of a little bit of a different episode, really, from what we normally do. This is episode 2 of it's part 2, I guess I should say, of the Steel Mill Modelers podcast or episode that we started previously. There was so much good information that our panel was able to give to us that we decided that it would be best to break this up into 2 because of the amount of time. So we are now here on, this is season 2, episode 14, and it's part 2 Steel Mill Modeler. So we have the same panel with us that we had us in our last episode. And before we get to that, which I'm sure everybody's looking forward to, because we've had a lot of really interesting and good feedback from the first part of this. Before we get to that, Pat and I also have a special Roundhouse Report session that we wanted to share with you guys tonight. So having said that, let me welcome my favorite co-host and good friend, Pat. Pat, here we are, season 2, episode 14. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, season 2, 14. Brad, we had several people post about listening to the steel mill modeling, and now they're interested, or they want to put something else together, and they're waiting for the second part for us to tell them how to finish putting together their modeling. But Brad, you and I we got to do something special last week, and that was Chase the Big Boy. Man, did we have fun on that.
Oh, yeah, what an outstanding weekend it was. And the one side trip on that was, and I bet many people are going to find this hard to believe, as long as you and I have been friends, I saw your layout in person for the first time over the weekend as well. I got to spend Saturday in the Pittsburgh area in Pat's home, which I also have not been to previously. And I got to take a look at the West Penn Panhandle Division for the first time. So that was a treat, as was our chasing of the Big Boy, which a couple different locations we were able to go to, and just a great weekend. And we got to spend time with some of our other good friends in the OG membership of the Iron City Facebook group. So yes,
yeah,
outstanding weekend. And we just wanted to take this Roundhouse Report segment to share that experience and how that went, and just to give our thoughts after, spending time getting to experience something that nobody east of the Mississippi has been able to experience before this year. And that is seeing the Big Boy traveling through parts of the eastern half of our country. So pretty awesome stuff. And we just wanted to just share some of our thoughts on that.
Yeah, before we do that, Brad, I wanted to tell our listeners, when you saw the layout for the first time, you also saw an axe sitting next to it. And you said, what's that for? And I said, when I see all these great posts, and you go, oh, yeah, I understand after seeing this why you would have an
axe. That's a little bit fictionalized there.
I think your exact quote was, "Can I take the first swing?" I said, "Please, not yet."
No, not true at all. Pat's got a very nice layout, and it was neat to get to see it. The really neat thing is a lot of the West Penn engines that are on there, I painted for Pat, and it was kind of neat to get to see those again.
Yeah.
Just pictures of them for, my gosh, what was it, 2021, I think, when we painted that old, I think it was a Jeep 9 or Jeep.
Oh, yeah, the mule, man.
Yeah,
she's still running.
Yeah, the first engine to be painted in the West Penn livery that is the most common. Well, it's one of the most common ones. We also have the patched CB&Q units too.
Oh yeah, those are nice. Those are sharp. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Brad,
that was a really neat experience. And I
Yeah.
like the way you have it set up with your engine shop there, like right in the center of the layout. So as soon as somebody walks into your layout setup, that's the first scene that kind of jumps off the not page, but jumps off the layout table at you is all that red and silver sitting there in the West Penn engine facility. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I was not even tempted to go for that app.
So the other thing Brad does a lot of mentoring with me and does a lot of mechanical talk through, especially when it comes to DCC and maintenance on the layout. And so how I bribe Brad to help me, I said, let's go out for some pancakes Sunday morning. He said, sure. As we're walking by the layout to get out of the house, I said, but first, can you help me with this? I'll buy the pancakes, but I need some help with this. And then I handed you something else. I said, hey, what do you think about that? Brad's like, are we eat breakfast or what's going on here?
There's not much I won't do for a good breakfast, though, so that was more than worth it. What I'm trying to remember, what was it? We fixed something, right?
Oh, we fixed a couple of locomotives and we troubleshot my Lehigh Valleys and figured out where to put gave me a little tutoring on what to do for the lubrication and where to put that. So I really appreciate
yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one that we fixed was that really nice commemorative unit that Benjamin Bear painted for you, I believe. It had
That's right. Yeah.
needed reassembled, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah.
If you remember, that horse has been shot out under twice now. The first one, the engine blew up on, and the second one, you and I took a year to try to find its replacement. So that has been a curse and a blessing. I love that locomotive. Yeah, but it's just giving me some fits. But I think Brad, I think you troubleshot this one pretty good and got her up and running. So I appreciate that.
It was good for both of us that we got that fixed, because then we could enjoy our breakfast and not get into chest because that is the paint job that Ben did on that thing was just outstanding.
Oh yeah,
that's definitely an engine that you want to be able to keep running for sure.
So Brad, let's tell our listeners a little bit about our chase for the big boy and a little bit of our geography of where we were at and the religious experience we had when it went by. And I'll let you go ahead and get started and just tell our listeners where we headed off to.
Yeah, step one of our journey was just a little bit to the northeast, I guess, a little bit to the east by railroad direction of the town of Derry, Pennsylvania. Now, Derry they have like a historical park there around the train station that's in Derry, and they had a big event there that apparently was pretty crowded, and I guess they had food vendors and everything else, but we were able to avoid that because, interestingly enough, our good friend and Iron City founder, one of the founding members, Kevin Squire, there's a campground, I guess you would call it, nearby there, and Kevin's grandparents, I believe he said, had a cottage in that. So Kevin spent a lot of time there when he was a little kid, and he knew about this location where there was a grade crossing, and we were able to get there. I was a little bit worried from prior experiences. I spent some time chasing the big boy as it went through eastern Pennsylvania, and I saw the crowds that kind of popped up out of nowhere when you were least expecting it. I lucked out on a couple locations, like at Nicholson Viaduct. I wasn't even planning on going because I figured you wouldn't be able to get anywhere near it with the crowds that were going to be there. But then I saw somebody post on Facebook early in the morning, like 5 a.m., that the farmer whose field is right in front of that. Some call it Nicholson Viaduct, some call it Tunkhannock Viaduct, but that farmer had decided to open up his fields to let people. So I hot-footed it up there. It's about a 2-hour drive for me to get there, and I got there just as that was starting to fill up, was able to get a prime location. But within, an hour or two, that field was very full, huge crowds. Then our good friend Todd Treaster and I and Nick Wummer and some of his family members, along with Neil Mones, ventured up to the big event up at Steamtown a couple of days later. And I don't know, Pat, that I've ever seen crowds like I saw there at Steamtown. It was just absolutely astonishing to see how many people were there. So then, I had another experience in Altoona where there were huge crowds. And then between like Lewistown and Altoona, areas that both Todd and I know quite well from extensive past rail fanning, we figured, there's got to be at least a dozen locations between Lewisburg and Altoona where we could stop and there won't be anybody there. Well, every one of them, there was somebody there. So I was coming into this experience in Derry thinking, man, if we don't get there and stake out some ground pretty early, we may not get it. So I, once again, left home very early that morning and got there a few hours before the big boy was to come through, and turned out to be a great location that Kevin picked out for us. So big thank you to him for making us aware of that and inviting us to join him. And I was able to set up a couple chairs, one of which you and Major sat in. So we at least had a spot there. And then as things turned out, it wasn't nearly as crowded as I feared it would be. And we were all able to get some pretty good shots of the big boy there, just a little bit to, like I said, the east by railroad direct, just a little bit, couple miles, maybe 2-3 miles to railroad east of Derry was our first location where we all were able to see the big boy. And that, Pat, I believe, is your first time ever laying eyes on the operating big boy. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. And Brad, the way it was set up, as I came through Derry, the town, it was like I believe I got there about 10:30. The big boy didn't come in till about 1:30, and the whole bridge was already full over the town. Now they had food trucks and they had other things there. They were making a big festival of it, but it was pretty crowded, Brad. And I was like, I heeded your warning. I was like, but I knew we were away from town, and I thought that was pretty good. But the way that line was set up, we had a crossing, so we knew he was going to have to blow the whistle, and B, he was going to be at his full speed, and he was. And that just, man, him coming down that line, and it's such a big engine, boy, you could feel it. You could feel the earth almost shaking. And the way we were positioned, we were still safe. We weren't right up on the tracks, like unfortunately I'm seeing a lot of in some videos. But we did everything correct, got some great shots. And then, Brad, we had the great idea of hot footing it as fast as we could to Pittsburgh. But I knew in Pittsburgh, Homestead and all that was going to be packed. So I said, hey, we've already seen it up close and personal. How about if we get like an aerial shot? So what Brad and I did, we went up to the West End overview in Pittsburgh, and we could see the whole city, and we could see the tracks and the incline, and then across the bridge over down at McKeesport. So by doing that, we could run from one side of the observatory to the other and get the whole view of the big boy coming through town and then crossing the Ohio River back towards 65 and Sewickley up to Leedsdale, then on to Conway. So, Brad, that was a pretty good shot. Now, I don't want to say
before we move on to what I know you're going to move on to, it's worth discussing. I think our plan we formulated on the fly, getting out of Derry before we got caught in traffic, because that happened to Todd and I also. I remember it was easily over an hour for us to get from like Huntington down to Altoona, just because people were following in the direction the big boy was going, trying to get out ahead of it again and maybe be able to stop and film it at a different location. So instead of heading in toward Derry to get on Route 70 and take us back to Pittsburgh, which we had to take Route 70 because the powers that be in Pittsburgh decided to close down the 376 Parkway. So 70 was our only option to get to Heroes. We decided instead of heading in that direction, we'd head in the opposite direction and head up to Blairsville instead. And if you remember, Pat, we saw wave after wave after wave of rail fans trying to do what I just talked about. They're heading through Derry in the direction the big boy was traveling in order to try to get out ahead of it again. We kind of abandoned that and said, we want to get to Pittsburgh. It was a couple hour trip at least. No, I guess it was about an hour and a half it took us because we didn't get caught in traffic. Is that right?
Well, yeah. And then we went on, so it was about 2 hours. You were right. It was about 2 hours total. Yeah.
So we were able to get then to our next destination that we wanted to check off, which was that high lookout up there on the West End, which the neat thing about that, Pat, I thought, and you discovered it first, but shortly after we get up to the viewing area, you can look down the Mon River on the one bank, the western bank, I guess, of the Mon River, or the southern bank, I guess it would be, on the south side of Pittsburgh. And you can see that NS line that we knew the big boy was going to be traversing. We had a pretty good shot of a pretty long stretch of track. Now we were, 700 feet above it, but still,
Yeah.
and we're pretty sure we looked down by the incline, and even from that height, we could see our friend Connor Deerdorf down there.
That's right. Which was shocked because he knew we were on the other side of the city, and he was like, "How did you guys get here?"
Yeah, we won't exactly repeat. After I sent Connor the picture and said, "I think I see Connor down there," he sent us back a message. But since we're a rated G, I don't think I can include the exact wording of what Connor said in that text. But yeah, it was kind of funny because I'm sure he was in the field of view of the camera, but he would have looked like the size of an ant at most because we were so high up. But that was kind of neat too, to know Connor was down there and that we were taking kind of a God's eye view to it. So yeah, we got to see it snaking its way down there on the south side of Pittsburgh. And then, as you mentioned, we hot-footed it to the other end of this viewing area. We're able to see it coming back across the river, across the Allegheny River, actually, on the bridge that took it back over onto the other side on the north side of Pittsburgh to start heading up toward Conway. And that's when something pretty significant happened that I'm sure you'll want to share with everybody.
So, Brad, I was having a great rail fan day.
Yeah,
and
me too.
I had been joking about a trash train. Now, NS has been keeping the track pretty clear of other trains within the vicinity of the big boy to give their fans what they wanted. Someone must have slipped NS a memo saying, "I love trash trains." Because as our big boy crossed the Ohio River and was coming down the incline, what did we see in our very own eyes that I was so astonished I couldn't believe it. So I had to I ruined Brad's video because I yelled, "Is that what I think it is?" And therefore,
the funny thing is, the zoom on your camera was so much better than mine. It was like you could zoom in twice as close. So I could see the big boy in my camera view, but then you come up beside me and said, "Look at my zoom. Is that what I think it is?" Like, yeah, that is a trash train.
So the big boy and the trash train together, side by side, heading west to Conway, heading northwest to Conway. I could not believe it.
The good part of it, Pat, though, is it's one of the few times where you're rail fanning and see a trash train, but you don't smell it.
That's right.
We were way too high. I mean, if we had smelled that trash train, it would have been deadly to people down in the valleys.
Oh, it was a good distance. I got a chuckle out of it, but I felt bad for all our friends there because we did have some Iron City guys. I found out later that were standing right there next to the trash train as it went by.
Yeah, pictures of it, didn't we?
Yep. Yeah. So sorry, guys, my streak is still intact. I think I'm 10 for 10, Brad, right now. Last 10 rail fans I've had the trash train. It's unbelievable.
I was surprised that we didn't see one up there by Derry, but they at least gave you a reprieve there. But you knew it was going to have to happen at some point during it.
Oh, I was like, this just can't be. You can't make this up, man. You cannot make this up.
Yeah, you can't. But the other neat thing about it is we were sharing on Facebook Messenger with everybody who was involved because we forgot to mention too earlier. Kevin, of course, was there because he picked up the spot, but with him was our good buddy Mike DeCenzi. And then the funny thing was, I didn't realize Jim Hoffer was going to be coming with us there to the Derry area, and I saw a guy pull across the tracks, and I was far enough away that I couldn't quite get him. But man, that guy kind of looked like Jim. And then 10 seconds after that, Kevin calls me and says, "Hey, Jim's out ahead of us a little bit. Have you seen anything of him?" I was like, "Oh, yeah." Well, not only did that guy look like Jim, it was Jim. So Jim Hoffer and Mike were there with us. But all through the day, the different members of ICE, like Blake George was out and about rail fanning too. We were all communicating with each other, saying, "Hey, it's coming through Homestead. Get ready up there, guys, because it's your way." And of course, Connor was down by I wanted to mention before and forgot, he was down by the incline that he built his module for, that won Best in Show at the Altoona show last year. So he wanted to try to get a shot of the big boy down there by that incline that he based his module on. So that was all kind of cool to see where the various guys are going.
And our buddy Jimmy Braun came out of hiding right at the end to help us, to tell us when it was coming our way. So thank you, Jimmy. Great. And he was in a great spot. We'll leave that alone. We won't tell him where it was.
He must have found a way to disable that air tag I put on his vehicle. All we heard about from him for months was, I have this location staked out where I'm going to be going. Yeah, well, where are you going to be? Nope, can't tell you. He kept it a secret right to the end, but thanks.
Right to the end. But he did help us out to tell us it was coming, so appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Jimmy. And then, Pat, is there anything else you wanted to mention about the actual train watching portion? Because that was not the end of our day. But wait, that's not all. I think, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so then we got a notice from one of our great Iron City members, Doug, that helps run Esther's Hobby, that it was going to be late night after dark at Esther's Hobby. He opened up the shop for us, and several people came in. And Brad, do you want to tell them one of the special guests that came in?
Well, Tomcat Catalano was one of them, and the other one was our good friend DJ from DJ's Trains.
That's right.
And then, of course, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say Blake and Connor, and one of Blake's friends from Colorado, which his name escapes me right.
I believe his name is Max.
Yeah, Max, yep.
Heck of a nice guy too.
They all came in, and we all purchased something, and there was a little pizza involved, and Doug, appreciate you so much opening up the Esther's for us. That was a bonus, and I needed stuff, so that was really good.
Yeah, I needed some stuff too. So yeah, big thanks to Doug for. I think he opened it up at like 8 p.m., which is long after their normal business hours.
Yeah,
that was really nice, and provided pizza for us too. So it was a great deal all the way around. And then, Pat, we had been in the heat all day, so we went back to your house, and first thing I needed to do was get a shower to feel human again, and then I crashed. I needed to get to bed. This old body was tired out, but what a great day, though.
Oh, yeah, it was awesome. And I'm glad we were able to share it with our listeners. I know not everybody is on the East Coast. Some folks are in the South or in the West. Hey, I understand what all the commotion is for all our listeners out West to get this. When they got to see it, and I was always taking pictures like, well, what's the big deal? Well, now I know. It is a big deal. And it's awesome.
To see that thing at track speed it's like you mentioned before, the sound from it, and just to be able to feel the ground shaking as it goes by. It's neat to see it when it's moving slow or even when it's sitting still. But if you get the opportunity to catch it whooshing by you at track speed, man, do not pass it up. It's definitely a rail fanning experience that you'll probably never forget.
Yep. Okay, Brad, I hear that whistle at the mill. I think we need to get back at the steel mill, and we're going to join this part already in progress. This will be the part 2 of episode 14, and I hope you really enjoyed the information that we're about to share. We'll be back right after this. So let me ask a question back to Steve. Steve,
yes,
now that we've confused our whole audience about steel making because we went over about 50 things in 20 seconds. Steve, on your layout, what are some basic rolling stock that you use to simulate model railroading for the mill? Like, tell us some things that you use. What are some cars that you have? Center flows or whatever you have. Tell us a little bit about what you use to simulate the railroad there.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So on my layout, the centerpiece of the layout is the Edgar Thompson plant, and I try to supply the mill as it's needed. So we need gondolas with scrap. We need we need raw material, we need scrap, and we need flexing agents too. So basically, what I do is I have staging areas on the layout to represent where my scrap is going to come from. So in my small bedroom, it's hard to create the Mon Valley. I do my best. So I have basically the front side of the layout is the Irving rolling mill on one side. The other side is like staging for the back side of it. And then Edgar Thompson, and then the Union Railroad classification yard. So at the classification yard, we're going to take scrap and basically all the raw materials that you would need to produce steel.
So you have
So
coal hoppers, you have like
yeah,
scrap cars. Yeah.
so from North Bessemer, PA, the ore trains are going to come down from North Bessemer, and then I'm going to have scrap come over from the Duquesne classification yard, and I'm going to have fluxing hoppers come in. So basically, the flux is just like an additive that you add to the steel that you all probably know about. So I'm going to have basically all those three elements of the raw materials come into ET and then offload them. And then once that's happened, I'm going to take the slab train to Irvin. So the Irvin has actually been reduced to a single track on the other side of the layout. So when I bring the raw material to ET, everything happens, and I roll out the slabs. I've got two slab trains.
No, Steve, on your slab train, what are you using? What kind of cars are you using for those slab cars?
So those are actually the slab racks that are modeled from a guy from Germany.
Okay.
And I know I've talked about it before, but so what you're going to see is when you look at the prototype, you're going to see the slab racks, or they look at these they look like a flat car with like strakes on the sides.
Okay.
And so there's two sets of them. So there's 2 6-car trains. We're going to load the slab racks as they come out of the rolling mill. That Joe, he talked about that a few minutes ago, where you bring in the raw material into ET, it gets heated up, and it rolls out into basically one continuous sheet of steel, if you will. As the steel comes out of the basic oxygen furnace, it's cut into slabs, and it gets cold and gets loaded onto these slab racks. And the slab racks get taken over to the Irvin rolling mill. And at the Irvin rolling mill, they're heated up, they're reheated, and they're reheated into coils.
Okay.
So
and do you use the coil cars then for the finished product? Do you have those that come out of the mill?
no, not anymore, because I used to model the Irvin rolling mill, as a lot of you all know, but because of space constraints, I don't do that. Basically, what I have is I have raw material go into the Edgar Thompson plant for all those needs, and I model switching or moving the raw material from the blast furnace to the Edgar Thompson plant, which is a short distance, and I have the slabs come out of there going to the Irvin rolling mill, but I only have one track on that.
Oh, okay.
And that's where it ends.
Okay. And Joe, if I remember correctly, do you have like the bottle cars and stuff like that? Do you model all that?
So I have essentially 2 sets of cars that I use with the steel mill. There's stuff that I consider intra-mill, which is stuff that's just internal to the steel mill itself, and then I have external facing rail cars, right? So, for example, you mentioned the bottle car. I use those to go from the blast furnace to my open hearth building, which right now it's just the tissue box painted gray, but I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a filler for now, but I do have the buildings for it. I just have to build them. But so I use the bottle cars between the blast furnace and the open hearth, and I use the slag cars, for slag out of the blast furnace. Out of the open hearth, I run these small ingot cars that are from State Tool and Die, and they run between the open hearth and the different mills that use the ingots. And then I also have another set of cars that carry slabs from the slab mill over to the hot mill. Now those cars stay within the steel mill. They don't leave. There's actually like kind of a demarcation line I have with the interchange yard that I tell people to not take those cars out of. And everyone does really good except for Phil. He took them out one time. But
I thought that's because I messed up and he was cleaning up my mess after I left the operation.
Is that
Probably was.
HO or N?
What's that?
Joe, is that HO or N?
And this is HO scale.
HO.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay, cool.
So and then, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Joe. I was going to say that leads into another question of mine. So I'm going ahead and ask you that too at the same time. Then I'll go back and ask the other guys about their fleet at their mill. Joe, a lot of people don't understand is you can run a hobby or a layout, I should say, in the hobby for a steel mill and never leave onto the main track. You could do all this internally
Oh, yeah.
with the mill.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah, definitely.
so tell us a little bit about, what you think or how you manage what is actually internal, what cars are internal.
So it really boils down to some of the cars that are within the mill wouldn't necessarily pass. So let me take a step back to set
Okay.
the stage. So
Thank
the
you.
era I'm modeling is like, we'll say the late 1930s up through the mid 1950s, and steel mill technology and FRA requirements and all that were significantly different than they are in the modern era. So there's a lot of things I can get away with in my steel mill that you can't get away with in a modern steel mill or modern railroading. But in those days, a lot of the cars didn't necessarily have air brakes, or, they didn't have the equipment that's needed to run them on the main line, that the FRA requires. So, they'll just build stuff out of random, whatever they can get their hands on. They'll take like a flat car and throw some cross beams on it and use it to haul slabs, so.
Right.
So that's kind of what I use as demarcation for that. They're like specialty cars in my mind compared to what regular railroads use. Like, I don't do none of the hot stuff leaves the internals of my steel mill.
Right.
And then I have an interchange yard between the steel mill and what I consider the main railroad. And so I model a combination. It's kind of like a branch line that runs both PRR and the PNLE or New York Central through that. And those trains are not allowed in the steel mill except this particular yard. So they can take cars in and out of the yard, but they're not allowed to run into the actual mill. And that's how it is in real life. Like Norfolk Southern doesn't run cars over to the blast furnace at ET, for example, or up at Gary Works, So I kind of mirrored that modeling in how I built my layout.
Yeah, that's a great example because, Brad and I were talking when I was building my layout. Hey, I'm going to have to realize that maybe I can say that the West Penn does some contracting inside the mill, but we don't go in. Like you said, I could work in the yard, but I can't, these internal railroads were all owned by the mills. U.S. Steel had theirs. Weirton had their own railroad within the railroad, and I do mine too. It's called the Iron City Steel Works, and I have some small switchers that are moving that in there. Now, Todd, I was going to ask you when using this, I've seen a lot of, like, I call them safety cars in between, like a bottle car or the slag car, but before so it's not next to the crew. Is that a technique that you used to watch? I remember you used to saying you'd watch your family members working a railroad up in your area.
Yeah, well, here in Burnham, where they have them, they have I forget what they call the car. They give it a goofy name, but it's got a big coupler on it to couple to the engine, and then they have it weighted heavy, and then there's a smaller coupler on it because the little bucket cars that they have to take the scrap up to the electric furnace to dump it in, they have smaller wheels or a smaller coupler to them. And down here in the steel mill here, they have two engines working all day long here, and they basically have a routine where they bring the scrap in, they take it to the scrap yard, and then those gondolas are out of how their Norfolk Southern delivers them, or Juniata Valley. So those go into the scrap yard and get unloaded, but then they have their own gondolas that they'll take down to the electric furnace when the scraps melted from those bucket cars. That's all that guy does. That's all he does. He just goes and runs the bucket cars up and down, in and out of the the electric furnaces all day long. And then the other guy goes down. He'll take 2 gondolas down to the melt shop, and they'll load the ingots to the gondolas, and then he'll take them through the plant up to the malt shop where they cut them cold. But he has to shift the 2 empties out of there, put them over to the wheel mill where the wheel comes out after it's, heat treated and what have you. And then once they load them gondolas, they'll take him down to the finishing shop. And the finishing shop and the melt shop are down in the middle of the plant. So that's all he does all day long. He'll take 2 gondolas out of the melt shop, take them to the malt shop, take the empties over, put them where the wheel cars would be, take the wheel cars down to the finishing shop. And when he's down there, he's going to pull the empties out of the finishing shop that they emptied and take them over and put them in the melt shop and do the same thing over again. He'll do that 4 times a day.
Right.
That's all he does. And then there's another guy that he moves around, like in the middle of it. He'll go down and take gondolas out of the axle shop where they make the axles, and he'll move them around down there. But it's just a process. And like Joe was saying too, that an outhouse, or like Norfolk Southern or any of them railroads, they don't go in and service. They go into that certain yard where they have the tracks at. That's what they have here. They have 2 inbound tracks they'll put cars in, and an outbound track they'll pick up stuff.
So Todd, you did a big remodel recently on your mill. What were some of the goals that you were trying to do? And I know for me, you and I have had this conversation, and Brad's had this conversation about, and I had a real enlightenment with Joe when I went to his operation session. It's just there's a lot there could be, right, the possibility of a lot of moving equipment, coil cars, scrap cars.
It's just a busy place. And
so how much space did you need, or what did you do to so you could actually do some operations within? I know you added some bridges and built some more. So just try to explain to us what your goals were with that reconstruct on your mill.
Well, my goal was to make an inbound and outbound, loads of scrap in, empties out, coil cars, things like that, And every once in a while, I know that the steel processing uses limestone. It uses lime because I used to put them in at the Edgar 12. I put them in at the Thompson yard there for the Union Railroad to pick up. I used to work that when we have a certain train that would work that drop cars in there. But that's basically what I'm going to do here. To shift cars in and out of the steel mill, I don't have enough area for that. It's not big enough. It's only a 7-foot long area that's only 18 inches wide. So I condensed everything in there as much as I could, but I have 2 big long tracks that I can put, 15, 20 cars in and 15, 20 cars out at a time. So
and Todd, if I remember, how many industrial, what kind of locomotives are you using within your mill?
Well, in the mill, it's the Union Railroad service is obviously the Edgar Thompson works. So I have the Union switchers there. And then I have a couple ET switchers there that I built years ago, to run the slabs and stuff in and out of the buildings and what have you. And there's a couple PLE switchers hanging around there too to shift cars. And then the PLE main lines run behind it.
Right. And so the union works mostly internal to your mill, and then
pretty much
out
so,
to the Pittsburgh Lake
because
area.
it's a U.S. steel owned. Yeah, their engines are painted similar, the same, and everything. But yeah, if I had it all to do over, I might have changed some things around and made that peninsula just a little bit different, that I could make a bigger mill.
Right.
But you can't have everything, I guess. But
right.
It's function enough for me, and it makes a little bit of happening going on there at the mill. And I just wanted a lot of lights and a lot of things, going on around the mill. That's just what I wanted to do.
Well, Todd, you mentioned that you said it's 7 foot by 18 inches, and so that's N scale, right?
Right.
So HO scale, that'd be like 14 foot and 3 foot wide.
Yeah.
If you really look at my layout, what I have for the main part of the mill, this is excluding my coke plant, it's really only, I want to say it's about maybe 10 feet long and about like 5.5 feet wide. So it is bigger than yours, is wider than yours.
Mhm.
But if I had the length to do it, I could have rearranged it in such a way that I could have made it work. So
Right, right.
it can be done in a small space, but you have to cut out some things to make it fit. You have to condense it down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's just, I mean, that's any model railroad is, you got to condense it down to make it anything work. But, you only have so much space unless you're particularly modeling a steel mill and an in-house mill. It's awfully hard I know a guy that was going to do it here. He was going to model the standard steel here, and he had a 40-foot long basement to do it. And he was getting it there, but then he got sick and passed away. But it's everybody has their own little niche, and like I said, I wanted to have something going on there, but it's just not enough room to do what you really want to do or would like to do.
Yeah. And I've even figured out that for my coil cars, I put them within the plant and kind of hide them for storage almost because I have to give myself some clearance because I just don't have the room to build the yards that you actually would need. You see these massive yards outside of the mills, you know, to move everything back and forth. And when you don't have that, you got to kind of consolidate,
Well,
try to figure it out.
my layout's basically like Uncle Dave Abeli's. It's mainline running with
Right,
mainline trains, but then you throw a couple locals in there like he does.
right.
But to do like switching and stuff like that, I mean, I'd have to have 100 industries that can handle 20 cars a piece to do that, and that's not possible.
Yeah, just make sure a note of this because I want to come back to this topic real quick on the operation side because I had a really big drive home one night from Joe's layout going, oh man, there's different ways we consider operations. So let me get back to that. But first, I wanted to go to Richard. Richard, I know you're the after product, but can you give us some ideas of I know what you have for a receiving of a customer, but some other customers you could think of that these mills would produce. The other thing Richard and I had a great conversation on, and I think Brad was on this too, is you just don't you can have box cars also picking up material from the mill because Richard and I had a conversation about what some of the plants made were much smaller still processed final goods. I think even nails and stuff and bolts and you can go in a different direction with that and or rivets and different things that actual box cars could carry. So, Richard, what were some conversations that you and I had about what the finished product? Where is it going?
Well, even like Jones and Lachlan Aliquippa Works, perfect example. They even shipped coils in box cars. I remember at a tin mill, you'd see the Santa Fe, those red Santa Fe box cars come in, and they were shipping coils out in those. So, yeah, coils don't always ship in coil cars. It depends on, like the customer need. Coils can ship in a coil car, coils can ship in gondolas, and, coils can ship in box cars. Like you mentioned also, Jane L. Aliquippa Works, they made nails, and those nails would go out in box cars. And again, if they're going to ship locally, they're going to go out in the truck. My Vulcan steel fabricator, they're creating structural steel buildings, so they receive via rail, all your structural steel shapes, your I-beams, H-beams, angle in gondolas, like sheet steel that would come in on a lot of times on flat cars. Then you have just all the scrap that's left over from the process. The mill runs, and I don't know what they're running today, but mill runs used to be 60 foot and 40 foot. So if you're making a building and, you only need 39 foot, you got a foot you got to cut off that beam. So that's going to go back out in a gondola as scrap to go back to the mill. You also have different pickling processes. So like Vulcan Steel, they receive tank cars of acid so they can pickle. And pickling just means they're taking the rust off of it because they're not requiring any type of a cover on that car. And like other options, I used to haul out of Bethlehem Steel, Lackawanna Works, which was up in Buffalo. They had wire. They made wire up there, and we hauled coil wire. And one of the places that we would deliver to is over here in Monaca, Superior Cold Drawn. And Superior Cold Drawn was actually making coat hangers. So that's, steel products are used for a lot of different things throughout the country.
One note I wanted to make about pickling there, since I can say I probably have more expertise in that than any other steel process. At least in flat rolled, pickling is used for taking the the scale off the material that forms when from the hot rolling process. So anytime you heat up steel to that level, you get a bunch of impurities in the outside, and those impurities are extremely hard and are extremely brittle. So if you try to cold roll that, it will destroy and literally crack those gigantic rolls that you see on those. You see them coming in on trucks and stuff sometimes. So we have to run it through pickling to get that scale off of there. But to Rich's point, if it's something that's somewhat rusty and it's a heavy duty beam or something, they'll use pickling to clean that off as well.
Yeah. And this is something else we used to do, Joe, is we used to haul, they called them black plate because it was just a steel roll out of Allegheny Ludlam up there in Brackenridge. And we took that over to Mercury Stainless in Massillon, Ohio, and they were going to put a coating on them over there. And like you mentioned, they would always pickle those before they put a coating on it.
Well, that's what they do here too. When after the ingots come out from the melted from the the poured steel, they cold cut the malt to make a railroad wheel. They have these big giant bandsaws that actually cold cut them, and that the malt's probably 18 inches across and probably 15 inches thick or something. Whatever railroad wheel they're making of the day. And then they'll put that back in a furnace and heat it up to 2,000 degrees. When they bring it out, they have to, like that crusty stuff that Joe was talking about. They get rid of it before they put it into the press for the die for the railroad wheel.
Wow. Okay, guys, we have hit an hour, and I don't think I got a quarter of really what I wanted to talk about. But everyone knows the process now. But for model railroading, if I wanted to go back real quick and we have a little bit of time. Let's just talk about the actual different operations that you can do. I know Todd and I have more of a mainline operation that goes in and out of the mill, so there's a little bit less space. I know Joe has I know you probably don't think it, Joe, but you actually have a lot more room to do the internal moves of the mill. Maybe not at a scale at HO that N-scale would have, but still a good scale. And Brad and I talked about this, and I was like, oh man, maybe I'm not doing operations right. And then we were like, hey, wait a minute, there's different operations. There's internal operations within the mill. There's the main line of bringing resources to the mill or taking finished product out of the mill to other customers. And I know that Steve sounds like he's focused on bringing everything in and internal. And Joe, it sounds like you've got a little bit of both. I know I have external and internal, but I don't have much room to do. I almost simulate what I'm doing within the mill with the bottle cars and everything. What are some ideas, guys, and I'll go with Joe first. Joe, what are some operations? I know you have a pretty good list of what you do. What if you could just explain to people that maybe are just starting or are trying to think of some ideas with their mill? What are some operations that you do within your mill?
Well, so there's essentially, we'll call it two different types of operations that I have. The first one is moving the actual product, and that could be, loading raw materials to the blast furnace, and then moving whatever product it is between facilities so that the next facility can do its processing. And then the second type is what I call like support. I actually have a train I call the steel mill general freight, and it brings some box cars. And someone mentioned about the pickling acid. I actually have some tank cars that I bring up right now for bringing in the fresh acid, and when the train leaves, it takes the spent acid. So you can focus on product flow. You can focus on mill support. You can do a mix of both. You don't necessarily have to model all of the the internals like I do. You can do, focus on stuff coming in and out of the mill. It's really in what your interest is. I know for me personally, having worked in a mill and been to, Gary and Fairfield and a bunch of other mills, through my time at U.S. Steel, I had a heavy interest in modeling the operations. And, right now I have a very generic operations, and I've really been wanting to try out some more detailed operations. But that kind of leads me to the point that you can handle it however you want, but it still needs to be focused on what products you're bringing in and out, what the steel mill is actually doing. And I do want to recommend, consider the era, because, steel production in, the 2020s is totally different than it was in the 1920s. So, you're going to have different facilities, you're going to have different products. So those are all things that really need to be considered when you're designing your mill.
And Joe, if I remember correctly, you said, hey, you can always, if you don't have the room, you might simulate a portion of the process and maybe just focus on whatever you have in stock. If you've got tank cars, well, then you could simulate the pickling and the acid, removal and bringing that fresh product to the layout. If you've got, coal cars, ore cars, you don't have to have everything on the layout to do the mill. I remember you telling me that. You're like, hey, I do what I have.
Yeah,
and I simulate the rest.
A perfect example is, and this is one that kind of sits in the back of my mind with my layout, I go right from the blast furnace to the open hearth, but then I have ingots coming out of the open hearth and they go right off to the mills that are going to process them. Well, in real life, part of the ingot process is the soaking pit, and, they do cleanup on the ingots and whatnot. I don't have space for another building on my layout to be able to have, as many products as I have. So I just assumed that they cool off in the open hearth building, and hope that nobody catches that I don't have a soaking pit,
Right. And I think it's each person will have their own mill, and they'll, and the space and the knowledge. You know what I mean? I learned so much talking to you guys about the process of the mill to understand. Okay, I've got these buildings, I've got my track. Okay, now how's the timing on this? What comes where? Where does the next process go? That all helps, understand when you're trying to do an operation where these cars are supposed to go. When you have the finished product, okay, where is it supposed to go? And you can simulate the customers, or you can actually try to go down the line, to the next town over that you have on your layout and have a customer there. But I think the sky's the limit. I think we're going to have you guys come back and talk some more steel milling. And this came from one of our members. I posted, hey, does anybody have any questions for our steel mill modelers? And I'll start with Todd on this one. Todd, what drew you to modeling the steel industry? And this came from Jimmy Braun. What drew you to modeling the steel industry?
Well, first, mainly though, because I grew up with the Standard Steel down here, watching them do the processing all the time. And this mill down here used to be super noisy because they had pneumatic hammers, and you couldn't even have pictures on the walls here in our town because they would eventually just fall off the wall. But I always liked the steel process, and then being a Pittsburgh fan and being around the city of Pittsburgh, always loved Pittsburgh. And then when I got, working for Conrail and Norfolk Southern, running around the Braddock, the Edgar Thomson plant there, it was always impressive to see all the lights and everything that's going on. And that's really what I wanted to achieve, was all the lighting and the looks at it, the aesthetics at it, as opposed to doing an in-house switching railroad with it. But I just love the looks of things. And let's face facts. I mean, Pittsburgh and the steel industry built America.
Right. Richard, what made you want to put steel production on your mill? I mean, on your layout. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of echo like Todd. Well, I grew up in the shadow of the steel mills here in the area where I live, Jones and Laughlin Steel across the river. Then we had Armco Steel here in Ambridge. a couple Ambridge is named after American Bridge. So basically, as a kid growing up, everybody that I knew, their fathers either worked for the steel mill, worked for the railroad, or drove truck hauling product to or from a steel mill. So not having room to actually make a steel mill, my second option was, let me do a steel fabrication facility, something that receives material from a steel mill and then sends out finished products to make a new building. Because that was actually, I worked for a company here in Ambridge that we actually did that. We were kind of a warehousing. We received product in from the steel mill and we sent it out to the various fabricating companies. So that's kind of my background.
And Joe, what drew you? I know you worked for them, but what made you want to model the steel mill?
Well, obviously working for them, I have a lot of knowledge, and I have an interest in steel just in general, partly from that, and the other side of it is, I grew up near Pittsburgh. I remember seeing all those mills around when I was a young kid. Meston Machine, Homestead Works, Southside Works. So I remember when those were running, and and seeing that stuff being torn down was kind of sad to me. But in addition to that, most of my family, or I should say my ancestors, were involved with steelmaking. I had both my grandfathers were involved in steelmaking. My one uncle worked for J&L in Aliquippa, and even as a young kid, whenever they went bankrupt the first time, and my uncle had lost his benefits and all that, there was a big rally down in Aliquippa, and like my parents took me to that rally back in the mid '80s, and I can remember being there and being involved with everything that was going on with the industry at that time. So, and the last thing, there's just a lot of modeling that can occur with steel mills, as we've said in this podcast.
Okay. Well, Brad, I think the big thing for me answering this question is I feel like we've all become historians with all the mills that are closed in our area, in the Pittsburgh area, and in central Pennsylvania. And I'm originally from Huntington, West Virginia, which was actually a big steel town too. Anything on the Ohio, from the Rust Belt, seemed to have steel mills. So it's in, I think, all our blood. And I think we do great work as model railroaders to preserve that work. So, Brad, let's pass it over to you for the final word for these guys and thank them for coming on this evening.
Yeah, first and foremost, thank you, gentlemen. Much appreciated. A lot of great information. Pat, when we started this, I think we both had a hunch that we were going to have these guys back because,
yeah,
first of all, they all know a lot. They've all done a lot with both working in the steel industry and modeling the steel industry. But when you talk about modeling the steel industry, you can say that phrase in about 5 seconds, but to actually talk about all of the different facets of what that entails, it's a huge body of stuff that we need to cover. And there's more to it. Like, we can get into the particulars of what's the difference between an open hearth furnace and a basic oxygen furnace and an electric furnace. There's just so much to it. And you really, if you want to accurately model it, I think, you need to be aware of some of this stuff, which I've read a little bit about it, but getting to talk to people who've actually done it, to me, is always much more valuable. So huge thanks to you guys. And we will have to have at least one more episode. This is going to be a multi-part deal, I'm sure. And probably with what we got tonight, we can get 2 episodes out of it, I would guess, Pat. But I think we still have more that we can cover with this. So just
absolutely
tons of great information. So thank you very much, guys, for sharing all that with us. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to listen. And having said that, Pat and I will be back right after this to wrap things up. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, Brad, if you don't know how to model steel, you do now.
Yeah.
And I think I think people are ready, right? We're a really good second show. A lot of great information. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, once again, just a big shout out and a huge thank you for taking time to share your knowledge of the steel industry, and not just of the steel industry, but how to model it. So once again, that was thanks to Iron City historian Richard Shirey, to our good friend on the NYSNA Pittsburgh division, Todd Treaster, and to first time participant Joe Grazoulis, Joe had the inside scoop because he actually worked in a steel mill. And then finally, thank you to our good friend and longtime Iron City guy, Steve McCune from down in Texas, for sharing his special knowledge that he has from researching and figuring out a way to fit a lot of mill operations in a small bedroom where he has his layout. So all of those guys just had excellent information for us. So a big heartfelt thank you, guys. And that is not the complete ending to this saga, though, Pat, is it? Because it won't be the next episode after this. It won't be episode 15, but in the near future, we're going to be revisiting the steel mill modeling aspect with probably all four of these same guys if they would like to join us again. But then we have our good friend Andy Zimmerman has some information that from a little bit different perspective that he wants to share after he heard episode 1. So that's kind of on the percolating in our minds now. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, it will not be the next episode of the Roundhouse Report, but in the very near future, I would say, right, Pat?
That's right. And also another special guest that's asked to come on and talk is Fran. He does the Pittsburgh and Lake Erie, and he's got his mill up and running now too. So those guys are going to give us some in progress, and one is beginning. So that's going to be good. One's in progress, one's beginning. So that will give us a heads up on some more ideas on steel mill and what their plans are. And I believe one of those is going to be a module. So that's pretty neat too.
T-track module, in fact.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so if you enjoyed these 2 episodes, take heart in the fact that we're not done with this topic yet. We have at least one more, and we'll have to play it by ear to see, what happens after that. But really enjoyed hearing what these guys had to say, and look forward to a future episode at the very least. So thanks again, guys, for doing that. And what else do we have here, Pat, before we close things out?
Well, Brad, I was going to tell everybody thanks for listening, and thanks for posting. The post after the broadcast is really awesome because it gets people thinking, but also draws people into different plans, different things that they heard on the podcast, and able to share maybe what they're doing, some examples. And man, it just feeds off of each other. I'm really happy with our listeners going onto our page and sharing what they know. And you don't have to be a professional. You could be you could be starting up your own layout saying, this is what I did so far. We're happy to see that. Everyone is welcome. Everyone has a good idea. And the axe is always right next to the layout. So I can always start over.
In fact, just one quick point. How many times, I wouldn't even want to guess, but I know it's happened a lot, where somebody who thought they were a total noob beginner came on and asked a question. And that question generates a lot of really good discussion.
Oh, yeah.
That provides information that even some of the more seasoned modelers maybe didn't know. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
With your questions, if there's something else that maybe you became curious about after hearing that, please feel free to share those. And, maybe they'll get mentioned even here on the podcast if you want to do that. So absolutely.
If people don't know the history, the whole idea behind the Iron City original 6 members was to gather information.
Yeah.
I was just starting. I needed information. I wanted to reach out to other N-scale modelers and see what they were doing. And it has escalated to the point I can't keep up with the information.
Escalation is a very good word for it. An escalation has taken place. Yes.
But we are an information site. Feel free. We're an information. And more than that, we've become a community and friends and family. So don't feel like anything you say on here when it comes to model railroading is a dumb question or something that hasn't been said or that's already been said before. Yeah, maybe 6 months ago, but we have a lot of stuff on our page. Who wants to scroll back? Let's just see it again. It's okay. It's no big deal.
And that, going back to our discussion of the big boy, that was one of the most special parts of it. Was, of course, you and I got to spend the day together, but even and we got to spend time at the beginning with the other three guys that we mentioned. But even guys that we didn't physically see the rest of the day, we were still in contact with them, and
That's right.
That's the type of community that Iron City has become, and that's just a tribute to our members and the type of people that we've been fortunate enough to get there. We love all you guys, and just anything that you want to share, you're not going to be ridiculed for. Anything you want to ask about, there's going to be somebody on the Iron City now who knows the answer to any questions and can help out. We're approaching 3,100 members now, I guess, Pat, which
Yeah.
who world ever thought that would have happened?
Oh, it's a testament to everyone on the page, I tell you.
Yes.
So, Brad, if they want to get a hold of us, we're the Iron City InSkill page, and we're on Facebook, and they can reach out to you, me, and anyone they heard on the podcast this evening. And don't be afraid to reach out. You can direct message us. You can post something on the page. You can tag us. Whatever you want to do, it's great. I will say the trash train thing is getting a little uncontrollable. I weep, I cry, but I laugh. So don't. If you see a trash train, you have to put it on there. I guess go ahead. Brad, also, they can catch us at the Apple Podcast, the YouTube, Podbean, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, Podchaser, and Boomplay. And Brad, I'll take it to you to let you finish out tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. Once again, thanks to the guys who spent this time with us. Thanks to the guys that we were able to rail fan with, as we mentioned, the big boy segment of this beginning that we did for this particular episode. And thanks especially to all of our members for all the great stuff. I'm trying to remember everybody who shared, and I do know our good buddy Richard Shirey, because he's an NS employee, was able to go up to Conway that evening. So and he was able to share some pictures. And I know there were others. I'm sorry, I'm just not remembering them, but just so many good shots of the big boy from so many different locations in Western Pennsylvania. It was great to see, and keep those posts coming, guys. The content is basically building itself, and that's because of our members. It's not just because we were the ones who started this whole thing. The two of us could never have done anything like this on our own. So thank you to all the members. Thank you for listening. And having said all that, we will say thanks once again for joining us for episode 14 of season 2 of the Iron City Roundhouse Report. All right, rail fans, that's all the steam we've got for this edition of the Iron City Roundhouse Report. Until next time, keep those gauges green, your couplers connected, and may your layouts always run smoothly. Happy railroading.